And then you guys, of course, can ask us anything you want.
Yep. Yep. Okay. What we wanted to talk about today was the COVID-19 addendum. I get a lot of questions on broker calls about this addendum. And one of the first things that agents ask is, do we have to use this form? And the answer is no, it is not a required form. And so it's an optional form, all right? And I have heard that there are some brokers out there that are requiring it, but it's been made very clear by AAR that it was designed as an optional form, not as a required form, because we cannot force any party to sign an addendum. You know, that they have to agree to sign something. And so the broker can't make this a mandatory form. But anyway, enough of that. The second most popular question that I get is, should we check the box on 18 or 24? Now, do any of you have the COVID-19 addendum?
Oh,
all right.
No.
Okay. So
can we just talk before we get into 18 and 24?
Sure.
What line 17 is for? Because that's like, why is that even there?
Yep.
So line 17, they made this COVID addendum and they said you could use line 17 if you needed to postpone and extend close of escrow due to COVID-19 and you know the date now. You have a definitive date that you know you can close on. Now, you could very easily also use just a regular addendum and say we are extending the close of escrow to blah, blah date due to COVID-19, if you want to put that. But they made this very specific for the fact that you're extending for coronavirus and everybody's agreeing to a very specific date. So you could send this over. If your buyer has an issue and you need to extend, you could use the COVID-19 after you're already under contract to extend the close of escrow. Does that make sense? Like you didn't use it in the beginning when you went under contract, but here you are 20 days later and you need to change that close of escrow date due to a COVID related issue. You could use this to do that. So just wanted to put that out there. All right, Nancy, I'll shut up now.
Nope, that was good. That was good. So you did bring up something that I was going to answer because I read something about that. AAR has put out a FAQ list for this addendum, and it's really, really good to read through it because it will answer a lot of the questions. But anyway, regarding the difference between the box on 18 and the box on 24, initially they look the same, the first part, because if there happens to be between any party that's involved in the transaction, it could be escrow, it could be buyer, it could be seller, it could be lender. If there happens to be a mandatory or a voluntary quarantine, which could be just somebody self-quarantining, maybe they are awaiting test results and they are self-quarantined, that is also covered in here. But it's an automatic 10-day extension that people agree upon up front when they sign this addendum. It can be, it can get complicated though, because if it's a mandatory quarantine or close down or whatever happens, it doesn't even start until that is lifted, that 10 days. So what if 6 months goes by and the quarantine is still there? Both parties are still locked into the contract, and in order to cancel, they would have to either have a mutual cancellation agreement. They can decide to mutually cancel the contract and the earnest money released to buyer if they use this form to cancel. But I read somewhere that we're not supposed to check multiple boxes on the form because it's a conflict. So you know, if you use this form in the first place, this would probably not be the form to use to also cancel. Right, Wendy?
Right. You could use it subsequently, you could bring it back, but it would not be the same one that you all signed on before. It would be a new COVID addendum where you're canceling. And why not do that on a regular addendum if you're going to decide to
Exactly.
mutually cancel?
Exactly.
They complicated the picture a little.
They did. And anytime parties want to go beyond 10 days, they can if they mutually agree in writing. But that's the gist of the box on line 18. Once the quarantine's lifted, 10-day extension, anything more, they have to agree upon. Line 24 puts a little more into that. It starts out the same. If it goes under quarantine, after the quarantine's lifted, it's an automatic 10-day extension. But then it talks about this delay should not exceed 30 days in total unless parties otherwise mutually agree. So it sounds as if parties can mutually agree on another 10-day increment or 2 10-day increments, depending on what the situation is. And if you want it to go any further than the 30 days, you still have that option, but it wasn't meant or designed to go beyond the 30 days. At any rate, on this form, when you check the box on 24, anytime a period of a time frame has expired, like even your original 10 days, either party can unilaterally cancel the contract. That's a provision that is not in the section where the box on line 18. It would have to be a mutual cancellation. So that's the difference between the two. And honestly, with line 18, you could still go up to 30 days or 45 days or 20 days, but it has to be agreed upon in writing. The same thing with the box on 24, but they put the language in there that it wouldn't go beyond 30 days unless mutually agreed. But you still have to agree to go the additional 10 days anyway, right?
Right. So what Nancy and I spent some time trying to like take this piece apart and put it back together. What you have to know is that this addendum was put together like really quickly when the COVID thing happened. It came out, and normally a new document from AAR goes through a rigorous vetting process where they put it through a whole set of, and they send it out to a whole bunch of people and say, everybody get eyes on this and tell us what you think of this. And then it comes back. This was like, boom, here you go. We have to have an answer to this. So therefore it was not as clear for how that is. So this section here says you get an automatic 10-day extension.
See, I need to have this.
And I think we have somebody on the call. Bella, can you mute? So you get an automatic 10-day.
Sorry.
You get an automatic 10-day extension that you can then extend up to another 2 times to equal a 30-day extension. But every 10 days, if you check box number 24, you have to renegotiate for the next 10 days. Because at the end of the 10 days, the buyer or the seller can unilaterally cancel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an automatic 30-day extension, it's an automatic 3 10-day extensions if everybody agrees to keep going with them. I'm not sure what their thinking was, but just that we really wanted you to know is what you're checking the box of and what you're getting when you do that.
Yes.
You know, now you have the opportunity, if you want to, and really want to make a mess of it, is going to the back and writing your own verbiage of what you think you're going to want based upon the COVID situation. There's an opportunity for you to write back there. But if you use either one of these standards, just understand one is an automatic 10-day, and then it's over and done with unless everybody agrees to something else. One is an automatic 10-day that can be renewed up to 30 days. Does that make sense? Okay. Did I get that right, Nancy?
I think so.
This has been a pain in the neck.
And I can share with you that Lisa did not make this mandatory. And between the three of us, we can all three tell you it's not our favorite addendum. I think, Wendy described it very well when she said it was put together very quickly and they didn't put a lot of thought into it. I've been on forms committees before and it's a process, and then you have to send it to the attorneys and everything. So the speed at which they came out with this tells us that they couldn't have possibly foreseen, what was going to happen. They probably thought it was going to be here and gone, in a month or so, but that isn't the case. So if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. If you do use it, we just want you to know what you're getting into. And if you want to just do extensions by way of addendum, that's absolutely fine because that's what we've been doing forever. So,
yeah, absolutely. There was something else I was going to add. Now it's gone from my head.
wake up, Dan.
You're muted.
I know. You don't want to hear my frustration on that, what I just read, so.
Oh, okay. No, we don't. So any questions, anything, anybody has used the COVID addendum yet?
So in a
Anybody?
deal that I'm under contract with, I didn't initiate it, but the seller's agent wanted us to sign it. And of course, it's box 24 that's checked.
Okay.
And see, I didn't even really understand it. Like initially, I just filled out the top part because I thought we would put it into play if we needed it, kind of a thing.
Got it. Yeah, I think that can be the confusing part of it. By the way, I did put in the chat the link to the FAQs on this, so you can find that right there and be able to look at that. Yeah, I think that a seller coming back and saying they want this, still doesn't mean the buyer has to sign it. And if there are brokerages out there that are requiring it, they're wrong. You can't require it. You can't require anybody agree to any other terms other than what's in that boilerplate purchase contract that we already have.
That's right.
This is an addendum. An addendum requires mutually everybody being okay with it. So nobody can force it. And then and if somebody comes at you and says, my brokerage is requiring this, say, lovely, mine isn't. Too bad, so sad. So yeah, not required. So any other questions about it? Other than the big question of when the heck is this all going to be over with? I love it. Everybody rolls their eyes and sighs at the same time. Right? Yeah.
And just one more thing I wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on. When you do use this addendum, regardless if a party, if it gets to where someone does a unilateral cancellation, regardless of which party does it, this addendum only provides for the buyer to receive the earnest money. So even if the buyer has and the seller have extended this thing out multiple times with this addendum, if the seller gets fed up and says, I just want to cancel it, the buyer's always going to get their earnest money back. That's the way it's written in here. Okay. So be cautious how you use it. Make sure you understand, and it can work for you, but unfortunately, they did not put a cap on how long one had to wait for the quarantine. You know, that's one thing that I wish they would have, put in there, because I mean, if it's a 30-day quarantine, that's one thing, but if it were to go on for months and months and months, that's kind of tough to deal with. So have you had anything come up with this, Dan? You work with a lot of the agents. Are any of them using this?
We're using it, just no one's actually used it for the intended purpose of automatically extending. So.
Okay.
So everybody's hedging their bets with it.
Yeah, we really haven't had a whole lot of like shut down things because of Corona or quarantine people. So.
Yeah. Well, we've had a couple of instances with this. One of them involved a situation where one of the buyers was overseas and the wife did not have the power of attorney because the husband was supposed to have gotten home before closing, okay? But he was in Europe and they got shut down. And so he couldn't fly out. He couldn't get a notary because they weren't allowed to, they weren't going out. Everybody was shut down. So he couldn't even do a POA. They tried overnighting him a package, but without the notary, he couldn't get the document signed. So that kind of thing, you know, was happening early on. It was a big mess, if you remember, when when countries first started closing down. So that was one issue we had to work through, and it finally did get resolved. And then we've had a couple of instances where a seller wanted to issue a cure notice, and so the buyer came back with, well, the lender can't perform because of COVID. And so they all do this 10-day extension. Sorry about that.
Is that your COVID alarm?
Yeah. Oh, that's one of my sons. Anyway, the one who wants attention all the time. Anyway, since we're not actually in a quarantine, I mean, it's very specific about how this kicks in. Unless somebody was self-quarantining, or unless we're actually under, a shutdown or something, you can't just use it as an automatic 10-day extension because my lender's late. So we've had that happen a couple of times, and it's caused some problems. So I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that everybody really understood what the addendum was saying, what it would be good for. And, I think that it really depends on the situation, whether or not you would ever want to check 18 or 24, because if you're representing a buyer, you may not want for the seller to have the right to unilaterally cancel if your buyer's late, But if you're the seller, you might very well want to have that unilateral right so that it didn't get drug out. You know what I mean? So it kind of depends on who you're representing and what the situation is as to which box would be better. But anyway, so
And I just wanted to mention that the addendum itself doesn't, if you need an extension based upon this addendum, you have to do a notice of disclosure asking for that extension.
Yes.
It just isn't taken care of in and of itself. It doesn't become an automatic thing. So you'll see that in the FAQs. What if I need to extend and use one of these extensions in here? You still have to notify them on a separate notice, and you can use the disclosure notification to notify them. It's not just, oh, we've got that COVID addendum that automatically does it. Yes.
True or false? The use of a notice of disclosure and it excites a 5-day cancellation period for the opposite side, does it not?
No, because if you're disclosing something, if you're disclosing a material defect or something new about the property or things like that. But at this point, you're using it, so it's a notification / disclosure. So now we're using it as the notification that we are invoking our 10-day extension because somebody's under quarantine.
Gotcha. So the 5-day cancellation window becomes evidentiary when you have some kind of notice of material fact or something detrimental to the property, like changing of names, updating spellings correctly. They're not considered notification, or not considered disclosures. They're just considered notification.
They're a notification. Yeah.
right.
So I'm just making sure, because I know that form can trigger.
Yes, it can if it's used as a disclosure. You're disclosing to them some material defect or things of the sort. But if it's a notification, you're using it as, no, it doesn't kick in that 5 days.
Okay. That's why I asked.
That was a good question.
Yes.
All right.
So anything else? We had a couple people hop in kind of late, so they did kind of miss it. We are talking about the COVID-19 addendum, and in the chat box, Wendy was kind enough to put a link there to the FAQs that AAR has provided for us, so that it helps us to better understand the thought process behind the addendum and how to use it. So I encourage all of you to pull that, to go to that link and pull it up and read the FAQs on it. And especially do that before you use it in your contract, so you have a better idea of if you want to use it and how to use it. So anyway, I think we've beat this dead horse. So anybody have any other issues that they would like to discuss? Do you think we've covered it, Wendy?
I think we have.
Okay, all right. So who has something else they would like to talk about or ask a question about?
I hear crickets.
I would like to thank Nancy for talking to me about how to approach if the seller was a FSBO. But it turned out after all that, I went and it was listed. It just wasn't on the market yet, and he had an agent and representation.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, we need to fill up the time with something. So how about, Wendy, do you have any thoughts on something else that we might want to bring to their attention about what's going on? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Oh, I had an interesting question come up the other day with an agent, and I wanted just to clarify. So it's a house more in a rural area, and at first they're told it has 2 septic tanks on the property, and then they're told that it's really only 1 septic tank, and that at that over by where the motorhome was parked, it's kind of like, just draining into a pit or something like that, and I'm like, okay, whoa, that would be a cesspool. And we need to deal with that. We can't just take their word for the fact that, oh, that's just for the motorhome. And it may be illegal dumping that's been happening on that piece of property, and a buyer takes on the responsibility by not checking it out. So, and I also came across a couple of years ago down in a southern part of the state, someone who was installing, I would call them wildcat septic systems for people who had motorhomes, burying a 55-gallon drum in the ground, kind of thing. Right. So I suggested, no, we want somebody to go and dig that up and look at that and see what's going on there. Don't just take their word for it that it's all good, and we need to, because your buyer may be taking on a huge liability after the fact. To dealing with that, and we wouldn't want that. But that was an interesting one. I hadn't had somebody, go, oh yeah, and they said that the other septic system is just nothing you have to worry about. It's just a hole in the ground. Yeah, no, something to worry about.
It definitely, most definitely. Oh, yeah, I've had a few interesting ones. Today, I found I got a call from someone that the seller decided that they did not want the old car and the piano that were at the house. So what do you do with that? I still have to get, that's one of them I'm still working on. But yeah, anytime you have a seller that does not want some of their personal property, it is still their responsibility to make sure that it's off the property. And pianos are not easy to move, and old cars that don't run are not necessarily easy to move, but you can't just donate them without the title. You have to have the title. So even if the seller says, hey, I'm going to leave this car, you can have it, still got to have a title if the buyer even wants to deal with it, which I doubt very seriously if very many buyers would. So anyway, anything else?
Just on that subject, so what if your buyer gets the keys and takes possession and there is property that's been left there?
Well, they're certainly gonna contact their agent or the agent's broker or the broker on the other side, because they want that removed. And so then it becomes an issue where the broker that was representing the seller has to make sure that the seller finishes performing on the contract, because it's their responsibility to remove the personal property. It's not the responsibility of the agent to remove the personal property, but it was their responsibility to communicate with the seller to make sure that it got done.
Makes sense.
So guess who ends up holding the bag? The agent, right? Because more than likely the seller has moved to some other part of the country and and doesn't want to deal with it. Had this happen a few years ago, and the seller was like, "No, I'm not coming back to Arizona to deal with that piece of furniture." And so the agent for the seller had it moved out, and the movers did some damage when they were moving it out. So it got even more and more fun. And so then the seller's agent ended up being responsible for the damage that the movers did, because she didn't go over there and supervise that move. And so, yeah, she was not happy when I told her that. Your seller said, "I'm not touching it, I'm not dealing with it," and said, "I'm not paying for it either. What you hired those movers and you pay for it." So all things to consider when you're dealing with all of that stuff.
Yep. There's always more to the story.
Yeah, once
And
sellers
you have-
get their proceeds in their hands, they're kind of like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So,
You had a question, Dan.
No, I just letting you know that I've dealt with it. I've went and emptied a seller's garage because he was in Phoenix and wasn't willing to get it done, and he thought his exact words was "F them. I'm giving them everything. They can wait until I move the stuff out." I was like, "No, it records. They own everything that's left in that house.
Wow.
And if they want to have it removed, they can charge you to do that."
They could also charge him daily rent.
And one of the things in his garage was a classic '73 Mustang.
Oh,
oh,
wow.
And all the parts to finish it. So when I told him that the moment it records, they own everything in that house, he was changing his song. He's like, "I don't know what to do. I can't do it, Dan. I don't know what you're telling me." I was like, "I think you need to figure it out and get someone over there to do it." He's a friend of mine, so I wound up going over there myself with a friend of mine, and two of his buddies emptied everything out of that house onto trailers so that it was no longer in the house when it recorded. And we got it done like 15 minutes to spare. And the buyer's agent was sitting at the end of the street waiting for it to record because she was going to be that lady and come by and create an issue.
is her name Karen?
Yeah. So, and she even came by and she even snickered right before it recorded. She's like, "Is it broom swept?" And I just looked at her like all dumbfounded, like, "What's broom swept mean?" She didn't know I was the agent. She just thought I was a worker.
No, okay.
And then when she saw my picture on the email I sent her, and then I've seen her since then, it was kind of like, oh God. So be nice to people.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I had one that came up today, heard from a designated broker at another brokerage, and just want to remind everybody, when you're selling land, there's a separate set of spuds for land. There's a separate binzer for land, and there's a separate set of spuds. And so you need to do those. And if you're doing residential income, 1 to 4 units, there's a separate addendum for that. And there's a separate spuds for that as well. On a residential income, the owner has to do the residential income spuds and a regular spuds.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
So anything else?
Ricky Anderson, how are you doing?
He's here, but not.
It's okay.
So Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. What has been your most challenging issue that has come up working with the newer agents?
Getting them to show up to these calls so I don't have to be the one hand holding them the entire time.
Oh, snap. I felt that from over here.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. What's been super helpful is getting them to read the contract. That timeline thing has kept us from having Binzer issues where they're not like 2 days outside of Binzer.
Mhm.
That was helpful. But the biggest issue that we're having with the new agents, it's not an issue, it's I think we can focus more on, is the proper way of handling Benzers and the wording to correct them and how to best handle the clients on whatever side of the transaction you're on.
I think you're probably right. We have more calls probably about Benzers than probably anything else.
So let's next week's about Benzers if we can.
Yeah, we keep doing that one pretty often because it's definitely a hot button for everyone. So
I would like to get a video series made where, I mean, every section of the contract was a little like 2 minute or 3 minute long video of how to actually fill it out, how it means, what it can do, and then just kind of have that series. I think that'd be good. Like section 1 is just simple. Just make sure you have the full address and tax ID.
Mhm.
I see a lot of those missing, the tax IDs. And then where the escrow money goes.
yeah, that's a box that oftentimes is not checked.
Check line 18 always gets missed.
Yes, line 18 is often missed. And then what you'll see that I do in the file is if you put in a contract into .loop and you missed line 18 or line 18 got missed, I'm going to look right away to see if I have an earnest money receipt. ADRE is very concerned about keeping track of where the money's gone. That's one of their big hot buttons. So if I see that the earnest money receipt is already in the file, I will make a note next to the purchase contract and it will say line 18 was incomplete, earnest money receipt in file. That shows ADRE that Nancy and I are supervising and we're watching for this stuff. And if I don't see the earnest money receipt, I'm going to ask you to upload it as soon as possible. Line 18 was incomplete. Please upload earnest money receipt ASAP. Because again, ADRE wants to see that. I was talking with Nancy and I was telling her, I tell agents there's 3 reasons you'll find comments in there from me. One is because something's wrong, got to be fixed. Something's not right. Signature's missing, something like that. The other one is we're using it as an opportunity to do some training, some teaching around something. Yesterday I received a file that had a SPUDS from 2012. So my teaching moment was moving forward, please use the SPUDS that was released in 2017. Okay? I'm not going to reject that 2012 SPUDS, but I'm going to take a moment. And the third thing we're making comments for is if when ADRE audits our files, they can tell that we were in there supervising and that we were directing and that we were, because they want to know that. So always look at those comments and go, okay, they're giving me some information for future use. They're telling me I have to fix this now, or they're doing a CYA and saying, get the earnest money in as soon as possible. Right? And those are the differences of what we kind of are doing all the time.
Yeah. Yes, and I think it is important for the agents to know that those 3 things, because I think that we don't always want them to feel that something's wrong when we give them a note. We do want to help them with, we're not trying to do, punishment for anything, so to speak. We do want to help the agents in teaching them how to do it better. And like Wendy said, ADRE wants to know that we're actually looking at the files and keeping track of what's happening with each transaction. So anyway, Bella, you're back.
Yes, sorry.
Did you have any questions today or anything that you've been having issues with on your end?
Let's not get started.
Okay.
So no, but I wanted to say I really appreciate Wendy, and you, Nancy. You have been amazing. And I'm sorry, I always have the disasters, but I blame it on the demographics. So, but yeah, no, thank you. Otherwise, no, I'm good.
Well, we're happy to be here for you.
Thanks.
We would much rather answer the question beforehand than try and fix the problem afterwards.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. That's why I'd rather check beforehand than, get in a difficult situation afterwards. But, actually, I do have a question, totally off topic. I'm looking for a cemetery broker. not kidding. I was, and it's really hard. I can't find anybody who is licensed.
Are you trying to do that here in Sierra Vista or in Tucson? Because one of our agents just left Keller Williams to go be a mortuary salesperson.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No, this is actually for Bisbee. But yeah, if you could connect me with that person, that would be great. And my client is not Count Dracula, but I just think it would be best if I refer him to somebody who actually knows what they're doing. So that's why I thought I'll ask.
Okay. We will get you that name then.
Awesome. Thank you so much. See, you guys are awesome. I appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, can you look that up? Was that an email that we got this week?
It was. And I'm
was
trying to
lovely.
remember who it was.
Jeff,
I think it was Lisa telling.
the name and phone numbers in the chat.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it.
that.
Thank you.
Geez, Nancy and I are just going to not come to this and let you do it from now on.
I know.
I would certainly hope that I knew what I was doing, and if you're empowering me and trusting me to lead the saplings of our country to grow into great profitable trees of real estate knowledge and excellence.
Sapling. I love that. Okay.
So, Ricky, I see you had a note in here that you didn't see the file. Do you have the,
I just found it.
okay, good.
Somebody
Good.
uploaded it. Thank you.
You bet. Well, if, let's see, what time, it's almost 2. If we don't have any other questions or anything you guys would like to talk about, we might just go ahead and wrap this up a few minutes early. We appreciate you being here and coming to talk with the broker, and hopefully we can always do our best to answer your questions and give you the guidance you need. And one of us will always be here. I know Wendy and I are always tag teaming the phone, and so we're here to help. And so is Lisa. She just happens to be a little bit busier. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining in. And Wendy, do you have any final words you'd like to tell everybody?
Nope. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.